All right, it is 11 Central on the dot, so we are going to get started. Welcome everyone to the Introduction to Jira Align webinar. As you probably guessed from the title of the webinar, we're going to spend the next hour together really talking all about Jira Align, some of the concepts that are good to know going into the tool, and showing you the tool firsthand. Before we jump into the content, just some quick introductions. My name is Vicki Murphy. I am an Enterprise Solutions Architect with Valiantus, which is a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian. And with the recent merger of Valiantus and Expium, we're now the largest partner globally for Atlassian. And a little bit about what I do. I work in our Agile at Scale practice. I work with Jira Align a lot, hence why I'm here today. I am a certified SPC and certified Atlassian professional. And I really work with our customers who are trying to scale within their Atlassian ecosystem and try and help them solve that need throughout the tools. Right. Just what's on the agenda for today, we're about to wrap up this introduction. We'll then show a couple extra slides that are just going to talk about some concepts that are good to be aligned around, no pun intended, before we start talking about Jira Align itself, and we will get into a live demo of that very quickly. At the end, we will have some time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A panel in Zoom. I also have a colleague who is on the call with me today who is going to be helping to share some helpful links in the chat as well, so keep an eye out for those. All right, let's jump straight into some of those concepts, starting with the positioning of Jira Align. Jira Align really is designed for organizations that have implemented or in the process of implementing a framework for scaled Agile. Some popular ones that we see are the SAFe framework, the scaled Agile framework, or the Spotify model. Overall, we found that organizations are really most successful in implementing Jira Align when they've been through at least one program increment. You may refer to this as a PI, a planning increment, etc. But one of those increments of planning at scale from a process perspective. And why we find that leading to the most successful implementations is overall implementing a new process and a new tool can be a lot to do at once. And also a lot of that process, as we go through that a little bit ahead of implementing the tool, allows us to really understand what we're trying to achieve from a process perspective, which then helps us inform some of the decisions we need to make when we are implementing a tool like Jira Align. It can just help speed up some of that decision-making process, which ultimately speeds up your implementation. Something you're going to hear me say a lot today is that Jira Align is a large-scale tool. It is designed for enterprises, which does lead to it having a higher price point than other Atlassian tools. Overall, the benchmark number that Atlassian puts out there is that it is designed for enterprises that have at least 500 developers. We do see that smaller companies may struggle with the overall size of the tool or potentially the price point or both. If you are working with a smaller organization, don't fret. There are still lots of great solutions in the Atlassian ecosystem for you. We're going to talk briefly about one of the out-of-the-box options with advanced roadmaps in just a couple slides before we get into that live demo. And I'll point you to some other resources that may be helpful if you feel that's a better fit for you. As we will see when we are going through these slides, as well as in the demo, Jira Align can handle the planning, visualization, and work from the C-suite to the Agile team. Another thing you'll hear me say a lot is that we are really trying to connect our execution up to our high top tier strategy with Jira Align. And this is a robust application that's really going to help us align our work across the entire enterprise. Another concept that really is prevalent in Jira Align is the concept of scaled planning. And like I mentioned, there are several different scaled Agile frameworks that you may be looking into, but they all kind of have this general idea of planning at scale. And I like to show this image in particular because it's really busy, which I think really represents the complexities of planning at scale. And this is where we're going to see when we get into that demo portion of the webinar, Jira Jira Align really has an area for each of these different tiers, and it helps us connect them and visualize them all across the system. So just to call out a couple of highlights here, starting in the bottom left corner with our sprint planning, you may also call this iteration planning. This is our team level. Our teams are planning out their stories into their sprints, often a two to 4 week time period there. Above that, this says big room. Ooh, let me go back. Big room planning here. We may refer to this as PI planning. This is really our program or release train level, that team of teams level, where we're planning out our features. We're going to see lots of great modules in Jira Align today, like our program board and our program backlog, that really lend to this idea of planning at this team of teams level. Above that, this says master planning. We often call this the portfolio tier. That's what we'll see when we get into the tool. Here we're managing our epics, those larger scale, PI, potentially multi-year work items. We're trying to estimate, prioritize, what is our organization really investing in from that development perspective. And finally, we have that idea of slicing. So there is a product management module if you need to use it in Jira Align. We'll take a brief look at it today. It is really something that you may not need. It just really depends on how you're organized when you get into the tool. As you can see, starting an Agile transformation or scaling Agile in your organization can be a really long and potentially complex undertaking. Our tools are never going to define the processes we need for scaled Agile, but they are invaluable to help us plan, track, and visualize work as we're going through implementing this type of process. Let's start talking a little bit more about Jira Align and how it helps us handle some of that complexity. What Jira Align really helps us do is sync time, people, and the work they do across the enterprise. And we're going to be able to easily see work from that top enterprise tier all the way down to our team level. Again, connecting our execution at our team level all the way up through the hierarchy to those top tier levels of scale, where we're talking long-term goals, long-term objectives, long-term strategy. As you can see here, Jira Align does offer product management, strategic portfolio, and scale development modules and reporting around some of those areas to really help us get that cross-team and cross-functional collaboration within the tool. Something I always like to call out here that you may or may not have heard of before is that Jira Align really is designed to layer with or sync with one or more Jira software instances, or potentially other team tier tools like Azure DevOps. Little bit of background here: when Jira Align was first created, it was actually a tool called AgileCraft, and it served as a full stack tool from the CEO all the way down to the team level. And essentially all of those different tiers worked within Jira Align. A few years back, Atlassian acquired AgileCraft and rebranded it to be Jira Align. And now Atlassian intends for that team tier tool to really be Jira Software. And I totally agree with this. I find that Jira Software really has a ton of great modules that lend itself to that Agile team work. Everything from the board functionality, the ability to easily plan out our sprints on our Scrum boards, the filtering functionality, the dashboard functionality. If you're in Jira Cloud, now some of that board level road mapping functionality really does lend itself to that Agile team layer, and it really is a very efficient and very user-friendly tool at the team level. When we start to plan above that team level into our program, portfolio, and enterprise tiers, that's where we're going to use a tool like Jira Align that really helps facilitate that alignment throughout our organization at all of these various levels that you see represented on the diagram here. And that's really where Jira Align shines, is that team of teams level on up, integrating with, again, Jira Software most commonly to serve as that team tier tool. As Jira Align helps us plan and execute our work across the enterprise, it uses those three hierarchies I mentioned earlier: people, work, and time. And if you think about all work, it really boils down to these three topics. What is the work being done? who are the people doing it, and what time box are they trying to complete this work in. And when we think about this hierarchy that we saw on the previous slide of the enterprise down to the team level, we have different work and different time boxes that we're trying to complete that work in at each of those tiers. And that's really what this represents. This is one of my favorite slides to show when talking about Jira Align, because I think it really conceptually represents what we're going to see when we get into the tool. So I always like to show this and say, you know, kind of keep this in the back of your mind when we get into that demo portion, and you'll see a lot of these terms mentioned again, and it'll help you kind of piece it all together. Get a drink real quick. So that first hierarchy that we mentioned are people. It's the words in white over here. Again, we have that enterprise tier, our portfolio, potentially a solution tier if you need it, program and team level. And at each of those tiers, we're working with different work items. So as you could expect, and you've heard me say a little bit, the enterprise level, that's where we're talking that high level strategy, goals, objectives, really long-term work. And then below that, at the portfolio level, we're gonna start getting into our themes. This might be multi-year work items that we are trying to accomplish. And we can decompose those into our epics, or sometimes rebranded as initiatives, that may last one or more PIs, and is often worked on by one or more programs or Agile release trains. And this is where we're going to start talking a lot about funding typically as well. If we're working with a solution layer, we may work with the capability work item. Most commonly, though, we are jumping down to the program or team of teams layer, where we're starting to talk about our features that can be completed by an Agile release train in a PI. So really talking all about decomposing into those smaller work items and smaller time boxes, all the way down to our team level, where we're talking that story and task level that we're trying to complete typically within our sprint. And most commonly, we see those sprints being a 2-week time period. I always do like to mention that while most commonly we are talking about Scrum teams and sprints in Jira and Jira Align, both tools can also handle Kanban teams as well. So if you're working in more of a Kanban fashion, or you have a mix of teams, both tools can absolutely handle that configuration. Again, at the bottom, we have our idea of time. We have things like strategic snapshots that are going to be annual or multi-year look at our strategy, our quarterly increments, sometimes called program increments, and our anchors represent our sprints, and we can also have releases in both systems as well. Off to the right here, you see some other business vectors that Jira Align does have that essentially plug into the various levels of scale, such as products, the idea of OKRs, our budgeting activities can happen at various levels as well. Whenever we get into Jira Align, like I mentioned, we're going to see a lot of these words mentioned again. So kind of think back to this slide if you're trying to kind of map that organization of the tool. Little bit about some of the offerings around Jira Align. There are 2 editions, Standard and Enterprise. Most commonly, we see Enterprise being selected because it does come with a sandbox instance of Jira Align, and that is very helpful during the implementation phase as well as into the future to do any type of testing or any activity you would typically do in a sandbox environment before rolling it out to production. There is currently an add-on for Jira Align called Enterprise Insights. This is a data lake of data in Jira Align that can be plugged into a BI tool of your choosing, such as Tableau or Power BI. And there's also some exciting updates coming if you're on the enterprise tier of Jira Cloud and you have access to Atlassian Analytics. We should be seeing some integration between Enterprise Insights and Atlassian Analytics coming soon as well. Little bit of new and upcoming news about Jira Align. Atlassian is in the process, as we speak today, of launching the new navigation UI. So that is actually what I'm going to be showing you today, working within that new UI if you haven't seen it. And we'll put a link in the chat to a deep dive video on that if it's something you haven't seen yet. Atlassian should be rolling out a toggle for end users to switch to the new UI in the next release. We are expecting it. And then we should have about 3 months where we're able to view the legacy and new UI. And then we will be fully moved to the new UI at that point in time. There's also a new OKR hub experience that I believe we may see a little bit of today that has rolled out. We can put a link to the video for that deep dive as well. We continue to see a lot of updates around the API 2.0 in the Jira connector, as well as the Azure DevOps connector from the Atlassian team. And an exciting new update is also the ability to forecast by feature. So if you're looking to do some forecasting within Jira Align, it does have some of that functionality. Previously, that was mostly at the epic level, at the portfolio level, but they've now carried that down to the program and feature level as well. Often once we start talking about Jira Align in this regard, we start getting questions about what does a Jira Align implementation really look like? Typically, we start with launching one program or Agile release train, and this is usually over a 3 to 6 month period, just depending on how fast you're looking to move. Within those 3 to 6 months, we go through some pretty standard phases, and you will typically see these steps being followed by any implementation partner. We'll go through a bit of planning. Again, this is a large tool. We want to make sure we have the right people in the right rooms to be making decisions. We'll then go through some discovery, learning about how your organization operates today, what your future hope is for how you operate, as well as looking into your tools that you currently use. From there, we'll go into configuration of the environments and, of course, training. We're really doing training all throughout typically, but some really end user focused training for that pilot program. And then our ultimate goal is trying to conduct a PI planning event using these new tools with that pilot program. Of course, all throughout the way, we're making adjustments as we get end user feedback, administrator feedback, etc. And ultimately then looking to expand into additional programs, getting multiple arts in that tool. In Jira Align working together, and then we expand into that portfolio level. And why we go this route, starting with that program tier, is because so much of the data that you will see in the demonstration today at the portfolio tier is actually driven by that team and program tier data. Again, thinking of the idea that we are trying to link our execution up to our strategy. The way that the tool really carries that out is a lot of roll up of information from the team level. So if you don't have teams who are estimating their work, planning out sprints, completing sprints, etc., you won't really see a ton of data at that portfolio level. And so that's why we really recommend implementing at first with that single pilot program, 3 to 5 Agile teams typically, and then expanding from there. Before we jump into Jira Align, I do want to make mention, if at this point you're wondering if Jira Align maybe isn't where you're looking to go right now, that's totally okay. Atlassian has lots of other options available in the ecosystem to help with the idea of scaled planning before you're ready for Jira Align, whether that be due to price, due to your process transformation, or just kind of the size of your organization. One that we work with very commonly is the Advanced Roadmaps, which was formerly called Portfolio for Jira. As the name really suggests, this is a road mapping tool that can be used to help you scale your process across your organization. This is available now out of the box in Jira Data Center instances, as well as Jira Cloud Premium or Enterprise instances. And really what this tool is great for is growing Agile organizations that need visibility, shared focus, and accurate delivery across multiple teams and across multiple tiers. So here we're able to get a bit of that roll-up information again from our execution level at the team tier all the way up through however high we want to go. And so this can be a great solution for smaller organizations looking to implement some scaled planning process. And it's a great stepping stone as you're maybe going through some of that beginning phases of your process implementation. As you'll see today, Jira Align does have more robust capabilities around the higher level of planning. But again, if you're really just starting out, this can be a great first step. In the chat, we'll throw a link to another free webinar that we do. It's our portfolio planning management, something like that, or portfolio management. I feel like we changed the name recently, but it goes through showing a little bit more about advanced roadmaps, as well as some other solutions through apps on the marketplace that are really great if this is really where you feel you're at. All right, and now we're going to jump into Jira Align. All right, so here we are in Jira Align, and if this feels new to you, it is because I have the new user interface enabled. So this is a setting that administrators can turn on. If you are interested in that, the video shared previously about the new UI walks through how to enable that. And then end users will see a toggle over here on the right, top right, to enable or disable that new navigation for themselves. So here we are in the new and improved homepage as well. Whenever I start talking about Jira Align and showing it, I always like to go through how we navigate across the tool. Couple of reasons. First, this is an introduction webinar, so this may be the first time that you're seeing this. Second, because again, I think it starts to show us how this tool really is organized around those tiers and that idea of people, work, and time that we saw previously in the slides. So again, here I am on the new and improved homepage. This now shows us recent rooms that we were in. With this new navigation, there's a real focus on the idea of rooms, which I always like to say are really dashboards for the various tiers. And we can also see pages that we have starred. If you're familiar with the Atlassian ecosystem, most of the tools have an ability to favorite or watch or star everything from work items to boards to specific modules here in Jira Align. In the new UI, we navigate using this top navigation bar, and here's where you start to see all of those layers of scale. We have our strategy, our portfolio, our solution, program, team, even our product module, if we are using that, is up here at the top. And when we click any of these drop downs, we are going to see the list of options at that tier. At the strategy level, this is the strategic snapshots, which let me give a refresh here. I may need to log in again. Apologies. All right, so there we go. Here we have our strategic snapshots, that multi-year look at our strategy. If we were to click portfolio, which I'll be doing in just a little bit to show a couple modules, we'll see our actual portfolio options. Same thing with solution, program, team. We're going to see those individual options that, of course, we have access to view. Depending on what layer of work that you really manage and work with is usually going to depend what options you have available here. Just a couple other things to call out with navigation before we jump into some of these modules. We are able to see our starred items here. This is a recent update. Currently, we can search through the pages that we have starred. Next to that, we see items. So as you're going to see when we start navigating, when we use these first few drop downs, it's going to jump us to a specific program, for example, and we can choose specific PIs related to that program. And that's going to serve as a tier 1 filter. And that is going to filter all of the modules we may be viewing based on those selections. So we'll see data for that specific program and specific PI. This items dropdown gives us another option to go view the full list of, let's say, themes or epics or capabilities for the entire system. And again, depending on what you have permission to view. So that's what the items dropdown is. There's additional items down here at the bottom. If you've seen demos of Jira Align prior to this, you may also notice that the work item icons have been updated to have a new look and feel. And what I really like is that the feature down to the task level, these are the same icons we see in Jira software. These are the work items that sync bi-directionally between both systems, just giving a bit more synergy between the environments. We have a blue create button. Like any other Atlassian tool you may have seen, it does exactly that. It gives us a quick link to create the various work items we again have permission to work with. On the right, we have our new UI toggle. We have personas if you're utilizing them. We do have a search button. I always like to show this because there's one hack I always like to mention, which is if you want to search for a work item ID, be sure to put this hashtag, octothorpe, #, whatever you want to call it in to actually search for that work item. Next to that, we do have some in-app notifications. Currently, these are Jira Align specific and are not currently integrated with other Atlassian products. We also have the ability to input checklists. This is a great way to put your process directly into the tools. You can share this with other users. You can make private checklists. Just gives you a great way to link to specific modules in Jira Align or potentially resources outside of Jira Align to help implement some of that process directly within the tool. Next, we have the help button. This is one of my favorite functions of Jira Align, especially for new users or people who are just getting into it. This is a contextual help button. Every page that you view should have some documentation on it. And whenever you click this, it is going to show you the documentation for that specific module. For example, if we were on the program board, it would show me documentation for the program board. This works all the way down to the individual reports, which is really great because sometimes you look at a report and you just want to know what data it's really using within that report to give you the information. And this documentation tells you that. What are the prerequisites for the report to show real data, and how can you interpret the report? And then we have our user profile and administrator settings. One thing to call out is the terminology in Jira Align is pretty customizable. So if you don't use terms like strategy, portfolio, solution, that is something that you can customize or your administrator can customize. We are using the typical SAFe terminology here just as an example because we can only show one example at a time. So we're going to use this, but just know if you use different terms in your organization, there is some customization options there. All right. Getting into how we can use Jira Align, there are really two overarching uses for this tool. First being strategic top-down planning, and the second being the visualization of work in progress as it rolls up, again, from the Agile team layer up to the other layers of scale. So first, let's take a look at some modules that really lend itself to that top-down planning. Starting at the top at our strategy level, I am going to choose a snapshot here, I believe this one, and we're going to take a look at what we see at the strategy level. Now, whenever we choose an entity from this top tier navigation, it's going to land us into the room for that layer. This is the strategy room here. This is a great place for us to visualize the roll-up of information, again, from our execution up through the top layers. At the top, we can see things like our mission and vision and values that we can input into the tools. And below that, we have our strategy pyramid. In the strategy pyramid, we see just a count of really the various work items that we have. At the top, we have our mission all the way down to our long-term strategy. These are actually customizable in terminology, so you can call these whatever you want, as well as disable any of these layers. So if you look at this and you think we don't have that many tiers of high-level goals, you can disable those. So you can disable really as many as you want in between mission down to long-term strategy here. From there, we start to see our linkage of the idea of goals and objectives to our work items that we are executing on with our themes, epics, features, as well as the corresponding objectives at each tier here. If you've seen any demonstration of Jira Align, you've probably seen this. This is a very popular view at the strategy level. Below that, we get into the idea of OKRs. So we have our OKR heat map here, giving us insight into how are we going about achieving these OKRs. So we are able to input objectives and key results into Jira Align, and we're able to check in on those periodically to provide input or essentially a status update. How are we going at actually achieving this work? Below that, we then see our OKR tree where we can see how different objectives may feed up into parent objectives all the way up to our top level of goals. On the right-hand side of this room is also some great information, again, giving us this idea that while we're at the strategy level, we're really trying to look at how we are operating at every layer of scale. So here we have some execution against the outcomes. How are we executing at our strategic goals and themes all the way down to our team objectives and features here. We have some snapshot progress showing us the completion of work. So how many themes, epics, features are associated with this strategic snapshot, and how many have we completed, and what's that percentage of completion? So again, intending to be sort of a dashboard, a first look into our overall progress. While we are here, or once we are into really a strategy tier, a portfolio program, etc., we use this left-hand panel to then navigate to the different modules in the new UI. So here I'm just going to go to the backlog. And I believe one update is So this jumps us into the Epic backlog. And to view the theme backlog, kind of a nuance with the new UI, I actually need to go up to choose a portfolio first. So let me go here and go to our digital services portfolio. I'm going to update my notes after this to remind myself next time. And we'll jump to the backlog tier again. You may recall from some of the slides that really the top tier of work is typically our themes. We do have a backlog for themes. As you can see here, we really have one backlog across Jira Align that spans the multiple work items. Let's go ahead and click onto a theme here. And the backlog can be segmented by PI as well. So here we can see the themes that are associated with this specific program increment. We can open up our themes, and just to give you a little bit of insight into some of the fields that are available, there is some customization here, portfolio by portfolio. You can choose to enable or disable fields, and you can even choose to require some fields as well. Here we see just some information about what programs are working on this theme, what are our program increments. We can start to input some high-level budgeting information and even some target completion dates here around when we're hoping to complete this theme. All right. One thing I always like to show as well is over here on the far right, there is this requirement hierarchy button. And this is a great place to see how this theme or what all work really rolls up to this theme. So when you click on this, you start to see that full hierarchy of all of the child epics, all of their child features that are associated with this top tier theme. Right. Let's go ahead and switch to our Epic backlog to take a look at what epics look like in Jira Align. All right, I'm going to expand this. And here we see all of the epics again related to the portfolio and PI I have selected over here in the left-hand panel. And we can see that we have 27 total epics for this PI. And just like the themes, we can see a bit of information here in the grid view. In the backlog, you can also rank. So you may be ranking your portfolio backlog, you may be ranking a program backlog, but you can do so by dragging and dropping here. We also have lots of other options available whenever we open up our epics. Epics have a lot of fields associated with them. Typically, this is where we're going to start working with the idea of budgeting and planning, pivoting and persevering are all processes that we're usually going through at this epic tier. So there's lots of fields to help us understand the information about this epic and provide that information as people are decomposing the epic into features. Here we have the details tab. This is where we just collect general information, a description. Is this a part of our MVP or minimum viable product? What programs are associated to this epic? Are they going to deliver this epic together? How does this roll up? What theme does it connect to? And what PIs is this associated with? Again, our epics can be associated to one or more programs as well as one or more program increments. For each PI, you can supply a WSJF or weighted shortest job first if that is a process you are going through. Jira Align does have a calculator for that. You can click on this and actually input each of the values for weighted shortest job first. And then it will, you just click through these tabs here and provide a new value. And then you can view the calculation as well. There's also multiple forms of estimation in Jira Align. You can do points, t-shirt size, team, or member weeks. Most commonly, we see points or t-shirt size being used, but you can supply that estimate here. And there's even more information as we scroll down under full details, a few other fields. There are a couple other types of estimating if you want to do a strategic score, etc. And then we have our child work items. So right from this epic, we can start to see how the features themselves, which features are linked to this epic, as well as the overall progress towards them as well. And this progress is driven by story points. So as we decompose this epic into features, we decompose those features into stories. Those teams estimate those stories, and this starts to show us that roll up. So this is exactly why we like to implement new instances of Jira Align at that program level. So we start to see this data once we get into the portfolio tier, because it is all really driven by those teams executing at the team level. Several other work items that can link to epics like risks, dependencies, objectives, etc. And if we go ahead and scroll on up, there's other tabs. We can do some design hypothesis here. There's a customizable intake list if you have specific information you want to have during the intake process of an epic. Under benefits, we start to see the lean business case, which is derived from information really on the details tab, as well as some new fields. Some of these are customizable as well if you want to just collect more information for your epics. You're able to put approvers here and information even about the funding stage as well. On the value tab, this really highlights how Jira Align is focused on value engineering, and you are able to even build out a hypothesis and collect information about research budget, overall budget to build, and decide to pivot or persevere right here within the tool. On time and skills, we are able to set specific specific target completion dates really for any of our phases of our workflow for our epics. We're able to do a little bit of skill management here, as well as set some fixed date milestones that'll be visible on our roadmap. We also have a spend tab. This is a lot of that budgeting information. Again, a majority of this is driven by the team tier of information. And so showing this always gets people excited that there's some calculation around forecasted, estimated, and accepted spend. But most of these are driven by information from your team and program velocity, your team and program story points estimation. All of that really drives into these budgets here, or these the spend tab here. Again, there is some forecasting for each program increment for epics down to the individual team level and how many points we expect from each of them. In the links tab, you just add some additional links in. On each of these tabs, you've probably seen something that is pretty steady, is this progress report here. Again, all about story points, driving from the team level of stories linked up through features, potentially up through capabilities, up to this top tier epic. All right. Couple other cool things about the backlog that really help with the idea of planning. There are some Kanban views available. You can implement a custom process flow to really show your custom workflow for epics, and then utilize this Kanban view to actually understand information about WIP in each status. You can put some exit criteria in here. Don't know if we actually have any. Yeah, you can add exit criteria and view that, see how long work has been in each status, things like that can be super helpful to that top tier planning. All right. There is, of course, other backlogs for the capability tier. Again, that's not always commonly enabled, as well as our feature backlog here. And as you would expect, you can collect a lot of similar information, just general information about features. I'll go ahead and open one up just so you can see it. Features can be worked on by a single program within a single program increment, and we can collect lots of information. Again, this is pretty customizable as to what fields you choose to show and not show. And you can even enable or disable these tabs across features, capabilities, and epics. One field I'd like to show on features is the why field. This just shows a little bit of information directly from the feature as to why we might be working on this. And it's really giving you more of that top-down look about information about the theme and the epic that are parenting this feature, giving your team of teams level a bit of information as to why this is important to the organization. All right. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and let's go into the program tier. And I'm going to find my mobile program and take a look at one of the really the shining star of Jira Align frequently, the program board. The program board is at the program level. It is that team of teams planning tool. And we'll just go ahead and click on that and get it to load. And it is really heavily used during our PI planning events. The idea of a program board isn't anything new. We used to see this manually done through whiteboards, tape, string, Post-it notes, etc. But now we can input this directly into tools like Jira Align. And why it's so powerful to do so is really because this is a standing report. This updates in real time as we complete our work, as we introduce new work, as we introduce new dependencies and objectives. This starts to show us that directly here on the program board. You see a lot of color coding here up in the top right. We have a legend. I like to say this uses stoplight mentality. When you see red, yellow, orange, you need to have some concern. You can click into each of these work items and actually see what some of those planning errors may be. Blue, green, gray, we're usually doing good. We've either started the work or haven't started the work or completed it. This board does show us features, dependencies, and objectives for our PI. We're able to click into any of these, again, see information about them, plan out our work. We're going to see the ability to add in teams as well as a target completion sprint. This is what we really use during PI planning. We can see child stories and dependencies and risks all directly here from the program board. And then we can also see planning issues. So Jira Align does a great job of calling out some of these planning issues so that we are able to try and solve those and resolve them directly here in the tool. Watching teams actually use this program board for PI planning is one of my favorite things. I wish we had a good recording of that to show, because really what we see is we just start out with a bunch of features in this unplanned sprint column, and the teams start to identify their work, plan it into sprints, identify dependencies and objectives all throughout that PI planning event. These little chevron icons or plus icons are our dependencies. We do have a dependency management module in Jira Align. There's some reports around dependencies, and you're able to view those here, view the team that is requesting the work, the team that it depends on, all of that information right here from the program board once again. One of the things I really like as well, especially when we're talking about dependencies, is whenever you hover over a work item on the program board, you'll notice some of the work items are grayed out. It is going to show you any related work items. So if that feature is associated to multiple teams, it will appear on each team's row, and we see that highlighted here. If this feature is related to any dependencies, we see those called out here as well. Even objectives, which are up in the top row, represented as these icons here. Right, so again, the program board is really great for that PI planning event, as well as stretching into the PI execution, where we are actually trying to get information on how are we doing at completing that plan. A couple other things to quickly look at. Again, there is a dependency management module for Jira Align. We're able to input those dependencies, indicate who needs this dependency, when do they need it by, and really have a handshake within the tool. I always like to recommend, though, we should always be starting with a conversation with dependencies. We don't want to be shocking anyone with a new dependency in the tool. We should really talk to that team first. This is what we call the dependency grid. It really gives us a highlight of work that we have requested, work that we need to do, work that still has us outstanding information needed up here at the top. And we can directly get to some of our maps or dependency reports. And a really popular one is the wheel view. And this is kind of chaotic, but what I like about it is it starts to show you where your dependencies exist across your organization. And as you start to see more and more dependencies, that may be an area where we want to maybe reorganize our teams. Dependencies are really handoffs, and that takes time to coordinate, to develop, to communicate back and forth. So maybe this report can be helpful in identifying those areas and maybe starting that conversation about how we organize our teams. I think Jira Align does a great job of highlighting communication points, I like to say. It's not necessarily going to tell you how to fix every problem that your organization has, but it is going to start to highlight that in reports like this. We can even go further by clicking on these specific entities, and it's going to show us information about where those dependencies lie. Jira Align also has a risk management module. Jira Align follows the Rome methodology for risks. we are able to open up these risks, put a lot of information into it, link them directly to features, and then roam them directly in the tool as well. So kind of lightweight on the fields that these risks have, but it's great to just capture that information, link it directly to your PI, link it directly to your work items, and then understand that roaming method here. And there even is a roam report, which is super helpful in PI planning events, I find. It's just a great visual and interactive report around our roaming methods. How did we actually handle most of these risks? And you can even start to update them from here by dragging and dropping. All right. As you can see from this, there really is a lot available in Jira Align. It is really great at helping us with that top-down planning, again, from our strategy, decomposing that into our themes and epics and features here at the program level. And Jira Align doesn't just help us with the top-down planning, but it helps us with understanding that roll-up and connection of our organization's vision and work as we are carrying out that vision. And that's what we're going to talk about next. But first, I want to have a brief commercial, if you will, just for Valiantus and some information about us. Again, we with the merger of Valiantus and Exvium and several other organizations over the last couple of years, we are now one of the largest global partners for Atlassian. So we are able to service customers all throughout the globe in any of the Atlassian products and across any of the platforms Atlassian offers as well. We do hold, I believe, all of the certifications that Atlassian has across the various practices like Agile at Scale, cloud migrations, ITSM, etc. One thing I want to mention is we do have a class all about Jira Align. It is called our Jira Align Bootcamp. It is really designed for leadership and Atlassian administrators who are looking at potentially implementing Jira Align for their organization. We take a more in-depth tour of everything that I've shown you here today and more. We talk best practices for the tool. We talk implementation tips for the tool, and really try and just have more of a discussion with you about setting you up for success with this implementation. So our next class is actually in 2 weeks on September 6th, and there's a link to register for it in the chat and purchase a ticket for it. You see a little bit about our outline here, and we also are offering a 20% off discount for those who attended this webinar. So it is VAL20. You can input that into the promo code. All right. Jumping back into Jira Align, talking about that roll-up of reporting with our remaining time here. Don't forget, we do have some time for Q&A, so if you have any questions so far, feel free to dump them into the chat or the Q&A panel. All right, again, the second portion, we like to really talk about visualizing our work as we are rolling up that information, again, from execution up to enterprise or our enterprise strategy. In this example, we are assuming that our Agile teams are working over in Jira. There's a lot of great reporting and visibility into our team level work in Jira with the out-of-the-box reports, the filtering capabilities, dashboard capabilities, and the whole slew of add-ons available for the Jira software environment to help with that as well. While we are here at the program level, that's where we're going to start by looking at the program room. We looked at the program board. That is a great place to see some progress of our features themselves. The program room takes it a step further, in my opinion, and gives us that insight into how our teams within our program are actually performing. And so you can start to see a lot of these widgets here start to call out individual teams. We're able to see our individual team load, how are we loading up our teams for this PI. Great place to see if any team is overloaded here during that PI planning process. Again, all driven by the roll-up of story points from the teams estimating their work coming up into our features planned for this PI. We can even start to see progress throughout the PI here as well. Right above these, I have my program information. So I can also see as a program as a whole, how are we loading up our program? And you can see some estimated versus actual information here. So Jira Align allows you to estimate your features themselves. That gives you your estimated load, which is often a lot higher than the team estimation. And so with the actual estimate, this is the roll up of story points. What this again calls out is potentially communication moment, where if we are really varying, like I am in this example here, saying that we are estimating over 92,000 points for this PI at the feature level, but our teams are saying that we're really only at 1,000 story points, and that's within our velocity. Now let's communicate about how we are our estimation practices across these levels. You can see lots of information about our progress throughout our sprints. Our overall feature backlog is here as well. We have information about dependencies, risks, objectives, the PI as a whole here. And where we can take this even further is you can even drill down into individual teams. So I see this room being used a lot in things, in ceremonies like Scrum of Scrums, PO Sync. If you use any of those ceremonies where you're trying to look at not just the whole release train or the whole program, but also dig into each team, lots of information and capability for that here. Another popular reporting tool is the road mapping functionality. This is really looking at our future, looking at the ability to understand where we are at today and how we are planning that vision into the future. I see this being used really at all various tiers. Some people love this module. Some people prefer things like the program room or program board. But we can see up to 2 layers of work here, start to see how that work starts to roll up, see our progress. You can see some shading here. And we even have the ability to update the color of these to signal different health statuses of our individual work items here as well. There's a lot of functionality within the roadmap, so I'm not going to go into depth, but again, you can check out the documentation on all the capabilities within the roadmap. All right, a couple more rooms to show you. Switching back to the portfolio tier, we're going to show the portfolio room, which we got a little bit of a glimpse of through my navigation previously. But the portfolio room allows us to view information for that portfolio for 1 or more PIs. So that program room, I don't think I mentioned this, it is for a specific program for a specific PI. When we come up to the portfolio level, we can start to see multiple PIs. So understanding how we are progressing as well as planning into the future. So lots of information again centered around our themes. How are we going at completing work towards each of our themes associated with these PIs? What's our overall progress across the PIs? Again, seeing some information about our features and how they roll up. And even each individual PI with each individual program with work in that PI, we see some progress information here. At the portfolio level, we may also be digging into some of our resources here. How are we distributing our effort across those various PIs as well as themes, and even into some of the financials. And there's some budget variance, budget allocation, which I need to choose a snapshot here to see, and even more here in this room. Yeah, some budget allocation across our themes, budget allocation across our funding, as well as a quick link to the investment versus spend report. All right, really quickly, let's take a brief look at the product level. I'm gonna go to my check scanning app. The product module is available for, you can enable it across any instance. Whether or not it's valuable really depends on how you are organized at the team of teams level, as well as the portfolio level. Just depending on how you need to slice your data really depends on if this is something that is useful for your organization. And excuse me, your implementation partner can absolutely help you discover that and absolutely help you implement that if needed. We can implement some personas here, see some information about our value engineering, that theme effort distribution. Are we putting our money where our mouth is, essentially. Are we working on those highest priority themes, those highest priority epics, etc.? Even start to see some of that effort distribution across our objectives for this product. Lots of different slices that you can enable here. I do always like to mention that using the product module is typically more of an advanced function, so I don't often see people enabling this right after they implement. Again, really when we're talking that first implementation, really looking at a single release train or program, getting them started working in the tools, starting to build up that data. And as you mature and organize and reorganize, which is very natural in this process, it may come to light that we want to start tracking this type of information or need these different slices of data. So people get very excited about this room sometimes, but really, again, when you first implement, can't recommend enough starting with that single Agile release train. All right, wow, I have talked a lot here, so I'm just going to throw up a slide here if you want to connect on LinkedIn. Again, the links to any of these resources that I've put up here are in the chat, so feel free to click on those or save those. And if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. We'll go through a couple here. And if you think of any afterwards, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Always happy to start that conversation as well. All right, let's see. We have time for a couple questions here. How customizable are reports in Jira Align? That's a really great question, and I realized that I didn't go in depth into reports. Each tier of Jira Align does have reports available. You can actually see them on the left-hand panel. You can click on reports here, and then depending on the tier that you're in is going to determine which of the reports are available here. And keeping in mind, these do adhere to the tier 1 filter. So depending on how you navigated, what portfolio or PI you've selected will determine what data is available. As always, keep in mind the help button. It does help you understand what that report is showing you. As far as the question of customizable reports, the reports within Jira Align really show us what they show us. Where we can customize is that tier 1 filter, what programs or portfolio we may have selected. To do fully customizable reports, that add-on that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Enterprise Insights, again, is a data lake that allows you to integrate with really any BI tool. Most popular is Power BI, Tableau, and now Atlassian Analytics, that integration coming soon. That allows you to do fully customizable reports, fully choosing what values you input, etc., to display those custom reports. Something else I'll mention is there are also opportunities out there. We are actually working to develop some opportunities to gather information from tools like Jira Align as well as other tools to give a fully customizable solution to reporting. So if that's something you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, still under development, but we're always happy to talk about that if it's a good opportunity for you. All right. Let's see. All right, so we already have Jira Align, but we maybe missed some opportunities in our rollout. For example, we aren't doing great at tracking dependencies. Can we just start doing that now? Yes, you can. So under the admin settings, you can actually customize what types of dependencies you allow. I always recommend starting there, really looking at what types of dependencies really exist across our organization and enabling those types. And then, yes, you can just start tracking dependencies at any point. Make sure you have your permissions set up correctly. And then I always recommend define your process, publish it where everyone can access it, and then go for it. And always come back and iterate. When we're talking about Jira Align, we're talking about trying to be agile. So come back and iterate on that process as you learn more about it for your organization. Right. To wrap up, I always like to answer the frequently asked question, well, what else should we consider before we start? And just kind of going back to that point I just made, overall, we need to define our process before we're starting with implementing a tool like Jira Align. Document it, publish it, make it accessible. even where you can, put it into a tool like Jira Align with the checklist functionality, use Confluence, SharePoint, etc. Make that accessible, and then go for it. Onboard programs into the tool, adjust, reorganize where you need to, etc., and start getting that data in at the team level to start getting that roll up into your higher levels of scale. All right, that wraps up our presentation today. Again, if you have any questions that you think of later, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or go to our website and reach out. We're always happy to have a conversation, whether it's about Jira Align or anything else in your Atlassian ecosystem. We're always here for that conversation. So thank you guys very much and have a great rest of your day.